2022 budget seeks to continue reflationary approach of 2020 in line with the National Development Plan, says Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. International Finance Corporation (IFC) to invest $3 million in Nigerian technology startups. Federal Inland Revenue Service generates 6.4 trillion naira from taxes in 2021. Plus oil falls by $1 as Brent drops to $79.68 a barrel. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Leah Katun Babatunde. The International Finance Corporation (IFC) plans to invest $3 million to help Nigerian startups through its Startup Catalyst Program Micro Traction Fund 2. This was disclosed on the IFC Project Information Data Portal, which is the largest global development institution focused exclusively on the private sector in developing countries. Micro Traction Fund 2 is a $15 million seed stage fund focused on pre-seed and seed stage investments in tech and tech-enabled businesses in Africa. The IFC has proposed an equity investment of up to $1.5 million through the Startup Catalyst Program and $1.5 million through the IDA 18 IFC Mega Private Sector Windows Blended Finance Facility. The IFC has pledged not to exceed 20% of total commitments, and the fund, which is domiciled in Nigeria, will invest in high-growth markets in Africa. Oil prices lost ground on Thursday, falling more than $1 a barrel from their highest levels in more than a month after U.S. fuel stockpiles surged amid declining global demand. And so the global benchmark Brent crude futures fell $1.12 or 1.4% to $79.68 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures lost $1.04 or 1.3% to $76.81 a barrel. U.S. crude oil stockpiles fell last week, while gasoline inventories surged more than 10 million barrels, the biggest weekly build since April 2020. Now, still talking commodities, gold and copper prices fall in first trading week of the year. Here's a look at prices on the commodity market. The 2022 budget is expected to further accelerate the recovery of the Nigerian economy and facilitate the completion of critical projects, as well as improve the general living conditions of citizens. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, while giving a breakdown of the budget, pointed out that it reflects the key execution priorities and strategies of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. Here's a report on Nigeria's income and spending plans for this year. Now have oil price pegged at $62 per barrel, with an expected output of 1.88 million barrels per day, an expected GDP rate of 4.02%, inflation 13%, and an exchange rate at 410 naira 15 kobo to the dollar.
The National Assembly had maintained the proposed volume of 1.88 million barrels per day, including condensates, in the 2022 budget. And this means that the executive and the legislature must push the oil and gas sector to attain these production volumes.
The projected aggregate revenue available to fund the 2022 budget of 10.74 trillion naira, inclusive of government-owned enterprises, is 32% higher than the 2021 projection of 8.12 trillion naira. Without the government-owned enterprises' retained revenue, the federal government revenue is projected at 9.01 trillion naira. Aggregate expenditure inclusive of government-owned enterprises and project-tied loans is projected to be 17.13 trillion naira. Recurrent non-debt spending is estimated to amount to 6.91 trillion naira, and aggregate capital expenditure is 5.96 trillion naira. At 3.61 trillion naira, debt service is 21% of total expenditure, while overall budget deficit is 6.39 trillion naira, to be financed mainly by borrowings.
Government will continue to create enabling environment for the private sector to increase their investments and contribute more significantly to job creation, to economic growth, and to lifting millions of our citizens out of poverty.
Critical allocations in the budget include 1.234 trillion naira to the education sector, 876.38 billion naira to the health sector, defense security, 2.29 trillion naira infrastructure, 1.42 trillion naira, as well as social development and poverty reduction programs, 462 billion naira. The budget will run along with the Finance Act that focuses on 5 key areas: domestic revenue mobilization, tax administration, legislative drafting, international taxation, financial sector reforms and tax equity, and public finance management reforms. In the year 2022, there will be some real reforms in the public service. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, again, while responding to issues in the economy, say government is harmonizing recommendations that include the Steve Oronsai report. Military pensioners had earlier protested.
We made a provision for first subsidy from January to June. And that means from July to December, there's no provisions that we made from first subsidy. So our assumption is that by June, we'll have been able to walk through a process together with all stakeholders.
Military pensioners had earlier protested to the gates of the Ministry of Finance over exclusion in upward review, but the minister assured that the 2022 budget has captured 24 months arrears for them. The national budget, she reveals, is wholly linked to the National Development Plan, and in planning, discussions are on for a national census this year to update the nation's population database. There is a broad range of changes involving review of salaries, review of government agencies, and employment generation that will be coming up as well.
To reduce the size of the personnel cost, and part of it, of course, will be designing exit packages that are realistic.
President Muhammadu Buhari recently signed a budget of 17.21 trillion naira, the highest ever in the last 10 years. The components of the budget were presented to the public Wednesday to include a debt service of 3.8 trillion naira, deficit financing of 6.9 trillion naira, crude oil benchmark of $62, while the sum of 5.61 trillion naira was earmarked for capital projects, while recurrent projects are to go up a total of 6.9 trillion naira. This morning on the program, attention is on the details of the budget and what it means for Nigerians. Our guest is an economist, Dr. Chijoke Ikechukwu. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year too.
Agreed.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, and I hope you enjoyed the holidays.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So for a lot of persons yesterday, the feedback is we seem to be taking in so much debt. And of course, the IMF lent us some money, withdrew some of our rights last year due to COVID, and we're repaying about $3.4 million. The repayment plan, we understood yesterday, will start sometime in the middle of this year. What does that mean?
In fact, there is no country in the world that does not have deficit in their budgets. Once you have this kind of deficit, every likelihood exists that you have to borrow the balance and the deficit from somewhere else. Yes, we've been borrowing from various multilateral institutions. The issue, and one of the most important things, is what we do with the borrowed funds. Are we infusing those borrowed funds into our activities, capital projects, and the like? Yes, that's the answer. So what is very important is actually how to utilize the borrowed funds. Whether there will be deficit, there will be deficit. Whether there will be borrowing, there would be borrowing. And we have to borrow to be able to fill in the gaps of the deficit. And that's actually what is going on. And I still know that Nigeria has a lot of credibility in the international funding institutions, and so we don't have a problem in reaching out to institutions to be able to get funds for our projects. So we have been borrowing to do projects, and that has actually taken us out of recession that we came out of very quickly, far more quickly than many other developed countries. So that is actually the implications, and that's the benefit of such borrowing.
Okay, so let's move from spending now to income. The bulk of it is coming from tax, and the whole range of the tax components was made public yesterday. For starters, what is your take on the sugar tax?
Yeah, first of all, I was so excited for the first time that our revenue generation projection is going to come more from non-oil sector. I saw that and I was so excited about that. So what that means for us is that we're not going to be the volatility in the oil sector will no longer affect us and will no longer affect our economic situation. Before now, you see that everybody's eye will just be on oil price. When it goes up, we're celebrating. When it comes down, everybody's just shouting. So if a lot of, and in fact, a chunk of our revenue base is going to come from non-oil sector, that is one thing to celebrate in this country. And that is actually what we've been asking for many years. And this is a welcome development for Nigeria.
Okay, so we're projecting a revenue, and where will this money be going to? The money, we understand, the bulk of the budget is going to security and defense. And just yesterday, the federal government announced that it had gazetted the naming of the bandits operating in some parts of the country as terrorists. So it means that we're effectively, as the minister said yesterday, in a sort of a war situation. What does that mean for an economy that is recovering like ours?
Unfortunately, imagine if we were not in this kind of war. The 2-point-something trillion that was projected for defense or for fighting wars obviously would have been far reduced and taken into some other meaningful sectors of the economy. And so there is no country that is in war, the kind of war we find ourselves, that is actually going to be surviving it. But here we're surviving. So it is unfortunate because we could actually have used all the monies we are using for fighting all these wars for some other things in other sectors. But it's inevitable. It's an expenditure that's inevitable. And all we need to do is just to make sure that we're doing the right things in that sector, to make sure there are no leakages, and then to make sure that we're winning the wars. Because if we spend all this and we're not winning the wars, we're just marking time. And so we need to move forward. When we spend, let us see the outcome of what we're spending in order for us to at least be seeing some growth and improvement in winning the wars against insurgency.
Okay, so on the foreign exchange market now, just as we're moving into this year, the CBN announced a new exchange rate on its website, actually. But the budget is still predicated on the 410.15 kobo. Will this differential in any way affect our income?
First of all, we have always known that the rate of CBN does not determine prices of goods and services, does not determine the cost of bringing in things from outside the country, does not determine the rate or what is causing the inflation rate that we have today. That rate has been changed, but what it does is that it will encourage some people to bring in monies into the country so that people who would have brought in money and gone to the parallel market to change will now want to start changing through the government apparatus. What that means for us also is that most of those inflows are going to pass through the government system, the CBN system, and so government can actually track them. Before now, investors will want to come in and they'll go to the parallel market and they'll exchange there and nobody will have a track of what is going on in that sector. So yes, it is an improvement for us. Yes, it is narrowing the gap between the parallel market and the official rate, but the rate that determines what happens in the market is still not the CBN rate, it's still the parallel market rate, because that's the rate that's determined by demand and supply of the funds. Of course, we know that the funds are not enough for all the people who want to import one thing or the other, all the people who want to make payments for one thing or the other. So if it's not enough, we have to continue tolerating whatever exchange rate we have, and while CBN works hard to make sure that it doesn't escalate to a point where we can no longer control, or a point where inflation rate will just continue to go up, and so it's okay to have that rate increase in order to narrow the gap between parallel market and the official rate.
Okay, so the budget is running alongside the Finance Act 2021 and of course the National Development Plan. So marrying these things together, government believes will give a holistic look, but there's a concern about how the subnationals, the states, will also key into the center, what the center is doing. But again, there seem to be some form of concerns. Again, let's start from the reforms we're expecting to take place this year, the public service reforms.
That's right.
The Ronsire report is in the offing. And also there is also the plan for a national census. Let's have a credible population data. What does this mean for development this year?
Yeah, going through the Finance Act and the amendments that are coming in here, it is the amendments and the adjustments in that act that is giving government the confidence to say we're going to generate revenues. Most of our revenues are going to be generated from non-oil sector. The Finance Act came in as a good development because we know that we have had a lot of, we have not been very efficient in collections. A lot of businesses have been going on, when they mention gaming has been going on and nobody's charging them company income tax and other taxes related to them. A lot of the other taxes, imagine all the multinational companies in e-commerce and fintech transactions. Their monies go into billions or trillions of dollars, and nobody's tracking them, and nobody's getting income from all this. So that's actually what the Finance Act has come to adjust. And Finance Act also came in to ensure that people doing businesses are not overburdened with taxes, making sure that small and medium enterprises are also enjoying some of the gains of the Finance Act. So it is a win-win for everybody. For government, it's a whole lot of win for them because we're now having a more inclusion for tax nets where they can collect monies from. And it's also empowering FIRS more to collect for certain institutions that have actually not been very accountable with their collections. A lot of revenue generating institutions in this country have not been very accountable. So having to have FIRS to do all those collections now, and in order for those to go into the coffers of government, is a very good development, and we expect that this will give us the kind of outcome projected in the budget.
Okay, so talk about the reforms now, the Ronsire report.
Yeah, of course. It is also very important that government is beginning to look at the Ronsire report. That report was a masterclass, when it was done. there were many, some other people in that team, and of course, when we say Orosai report, that's the head of the team. He came to actually reduce the cost of governance. He came to merge certain departments that actually were duplicated in terms of functions, and you see that is already beginning to happen in the oil sector. So right now, some oil MDAs are beginning, oil companies within the area, the MDAs in the oil sector are beginning to merge their functions and beginning to merge their staffers. And of course, they also assure that people are not going to lose their jobs. So what that means is that certain locations that were supposed to go to these parastatals will now be consolidated, and we know what we're doing. And control aspects will also be retained. In some other ones, you see that monies that were supposed to actually be managed by straight to the government coffers are managed by some parastatals, and they don't account for them. And you don't even see, nobody ever makes them accountable, to the extent that you don't know how much these parastatals are receiving. You don't even know how much they are remitting to the treasury of government. And so these are the kind of things Morosaya's team tried to achieve in order for us to have good governance in the government.
Okay, I'm told our time is up, actually. So I will sincerely thank you, Doctor, for making time to come on.
Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure.
Yes, and do have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move straight to surviving COVID-19 with Judith Nwachukwu. She is a fashion designer who received the AXMIS loan from the Central Bank of Nigeria in 2021 to support her business. Moplang Dekok has her story.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
COVID-19 had a way of affecting us. In the fashion industry, we were able to produce face masks, cloth face masks. So that helped our business a lot during the COVID-19. Yeah, we were selling online. We have an online outfit. So we're able to produce, post online, and at the end of the day, we're able to deliver. Yes, I've applied and I was privileged to get. I saw this online and I applied without knowing anybody. Just to prove a point that the federal government is doing something for SMEs. And I got it. I got quite some money to support my business. Wow. The money helped me in my production. I was able to buy materials. I was able to pay my staffs in very many ways. But I need more funds to expand. Let's remove all the barriers, all the bring this, bring that. We're just a small business trying to come up. You're not going to ask us to bring our grandfather's bone just to get a loan. I mean, the government needs to really look at that and to get mentors to help people in terms of when you are well informed, you can't be deformed.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
The equities market closed on a bullish note this Wednesday, sustaining gains from the first trading day of the year in line with global positive momentum. The all-share index climbed 1% to close 43,476.75 points, and equity capitalization appreciated to 23.4 trillion naira. 1.24 billion shares worth 42.9 billion naira exchanged hands in 4,032 deals. Boa Foods, Wema Bank and Transco are the top three most traded stocks at the end of the day's transaction. And away from home on the global scene, Australian shares posted their biggest drop since September 2020 this Thursday after first 2 days of gains. Neka Oku has a summary of global stock market activities.
Stocks in Asia Pacific declined on Thursday following losses overnight that saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average notching its first decline of 2022. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 slipped 2.88% to close at 28,487.87. The Shanghai Composite in mainland China closed 0.21% lower at 3,587.61, while the Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index shed 0.41%. European markets are set to follow their Asian counterparts into the red following losses in the US during Wednesday's trading session. The UK's FTSE index is seen opening 114 points lower at 7,391. Germany's DAX down 285 points, and CAC 40 of France is also pointing down. In the US, stock futures were muted in overnight trading after the major US stock averages fell sharply in the first losing regular trading session of the year. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained just 2 points. S&P 500 ticked down 0.04% and Nasdaq 100 rose 0.01%. African markets have just opened this Thursday morning but are yet to post numbers.
Thank you, Nneka, and we end the program here. But we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. We value your feedback, so keep your comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Have a good morning.